Testing. 1, 2. Test. Let me see here. Okay, I think I should be good. Oh no. Let me see. Oh, there we go. Excellent. Okay. We will begin shortly. Oops. Boom. Enter. Let's see. Pin. Alright, let me just get a drink. Let me see here. Okay. I'll be right back. Let's see. Is this? Can I? Oh, okay. Might not use my headphones because it's pretty loud. Soda pop. Okay. Okay. Hello, Jeremy Borno. Let me try this one more time. Try to hear the music I'm playing, but it might be a bit too distracting. Okay. Hello, welcome to the program. This is the Black Ponder. I'm Neil Trotter, the host, and welcome. This Black Ponder is a philosophy YouTube channel, and we primarily talk about philosophical texts, and we kind of have discourses and dialogues about them. But sometimes we even do some streams where we pick a topic and we talk about it live, or maybe you'll catch the stream later and you'll comment below at a different time. That's cool too. But welcome. The point of the streams is to update or level up my philosophy game. Trying to, become not just an amateur philosopher, well, that's what I'm trying to be. Amateur philosopher. Not so much a philosophy enthusiast or a philosophy hobbyist. Let's be an actual philosopher. That would be cool. And part of that is like talking to people, not just reading and regurgitating information, but like having conversations and dialogues with people. How long has realism been trendy? This is what Jeremy asked. I barely pay attention much to mainstream movies and shows. Okay, okay. Yep, we can definitely talk about that. Yeah, so yeah, and so that was the context of the live stream. Now, yeah, let's get into the topic. Today's topic is, isn't it like realism? The trend of realism in media. Yeah, that's what I picked. hmm Yeah, so how long has it been, right? Well, Okay, let me see if I can. Yeah, I think the microphone is not pointing directly at me. So let's see. Do that. Adjust my mic. Okay, cool. Yeah, so when I was a kid in the 90s, we had television shows like what? 1990s. We had one of my favorite shows was Charmed. That was an old school show. It had like Shannon Dorothy, I think her name is. She's like was on Beverly Hills 90210, the original one. Now I was too young. That's before my time. The microphone is peaking. Okay, bring it down. Bring it down. No, bring it. Okay, we're messing with the levels here. Beverly Hills 90210. That was before my time, right? But she came back with the Charm, and that was just a television show about three sisters who are witches, and they were living in San Francisco doing their witch stuff. And it had a lot of drama, but it was more like a soap opera, and it was very episodic. But it was not very realistic at all. But it was cute. What else did we have that I like? I remember Hercules. Hercules was pretty cool. Too bad about Kevin Sorbo. He's now like I guess he always was a fundamentalist Christian. Because I remember, but I used to love that show, Hercules. I still, it's a great show. I mean, these are shows that wouldn't last today. But I remember I was, I saw Hercules when I was a little kid. The live action Hercules, and it was just a nice episodic show. Had like Monster of the Week type of deal. And then like maybe it was like 2015 or something like that. I saw like Hercules talking. I'm like, hey, I remember that guy. That's the guy from Hercules, Kevin Sorbo. But then he went on this whole rant about like how Islam is evil and how it needs to be eradicated, and I'm like, whoa. Hercules like that? And I'm like, man, I lost a lot of respect for Hercules. Islam, he was very Islamophobic, and apparently, like, he makes a lot of Christian. I mean, but that's a whole other thing. But that was just interesting. So I liked Hercules, and then they had a spin-off show, right? Xena Warrior Princess. That's another like standard 1990s show. Xena Warrior Princess is about this. It's so cheesy, but it was those were the shows at the time, right? You had this badass warrior woman who was fighting like Greek mythical gods and demigods, and she was bad. And it was like very episodic. Like they had a beginning and a middle and an end for each episode. Sometimes they would do like to be continues. They don't do that no more. And when you saw the to be continued, you're like, oh, okay, this is gonna be cool. So they would have the little arc that would last 2 episodes. But rarely would like story arcs go past like 2 episodes. They like kind of finish, right? So you had Xena Warrior Princess. What else you had? I mean, you had all these kinds of shows. But there was Buffy the Vampire Slayer. I remember that show. That was pretty episodic. Now, that show kind of did have some story arcs to it, but it's kind of soap opera-ish, and it was like, I would not say it was very realistic. I'm thinking about other shows at that time, toss them out maybe if you were from the 90s. And it was just a very different, like, those kinds of shows would not succeed today. And I would argue it's not because they're bad quality. It's because the focus has shifted to like more realistic ways of doing things, telling stories, which is not necessarily a good thing, I would argue. And then you're saying, nonetheless, I'm questioning if this trend will turn the audience outlook on life negative. And then we also have hashtag NYSBG96. Hello. Fire. Hello. How's it going? You know, and so, you had these kinds of shows that were pretty goofy and silly and kind of over the top, but it was fine. We just accepted these shows as like, it was television. Even movies were kind of like over the top, goofy, silly. You just accept it like, okay, it's escapism, right? So the first thing that happened that ended that era was reality TV. And I don't know if you're old enough to recall the reality TV that kind of dominated the late 90s, early 2000s. I think Survivor. Oh no, it was basically The Real World from MTV. That was, I think that's like one of the first, if not the first reality TV show, The Real World. And then Survivor really kicked it off. And then from then on, you just had television was just dominated with reality TV. I guess the height of that would be like The Simple Life with Paris Hilton, right? And that was the start. That was the start of where the focus shifted. That's when a lot, people like me kind of dropped off and stopped watching television and we all, all of us that grew up during that time remember, like, oh yeah, this is bad television. So a lot of us kind of dipped out. And it was very easy, cheap, very cheap way of making entertainment that a lot of people watch because people like watching train wrecks and people like watching like drama, and it was like kind of this drama that was just mimicking reality in a way, right? You kind of see, because you see that kind of drama in like the workplace and your friends and the gossip. It was like a more realistic soap opera, right? But it was with real quote unquote people. And television was dominated by that late 90s up to the 2000s, right? You're not a 90s kid, but I'm aware that really TV changed the world. Reality TV changed. Yeah, that was the whole thing. It just like, you turned on TV, everything was just a reality show. It was just so bad. So that's why I kind of just dipped. This is when I was kind of like a teenager, if I recall correctly. I just stopped watching television. It was so bad. So reality TV, and that was actually, a lot of that happened also during the, when 9/11 happened, when the terrorists hit the Twin Towers, and that whole thing that rocked everybody's like mindset. If you remember that time, it was really like existential. People were like, whoa, what the fuck is reality? Right. So a lot of that reality TV was kind of this way of people coping with this really crazy thing that was like shifting people's sense of stability and sense of like comfort. People would cling on to the reality. I just want to just everything back to, give me that like reality, like that pseudo reality. That's what I want. I think that was a huge part of why reality TV kind of stuck. Because that 9/11 happened, people just wanted to just have something easy to consume that they didn't have to think about. That kind of they could escape into. That was kind of just drama, and it wasn't like about them. I think that was a huge part of it. The real world impact. Yep. Eventually, reality TV was a big thing, and then I think the channel A&E. That was a television channel. It's called A&E. Right. I think it's still around. I don't know. I haven't watched TV, but I do remember. A&E is what brought television back from the depths. They started coming out with these television shows that were just high quality. They were kind of like shot like film. Like one of the biggest television shows from that time was the Breaking Bad, right? Breaking Bad, that's and then you started seeing the shift in like The Sopranos was another one. Although The Sopranos was that A&E? I forgot what that was. But these kinds of shows that more focused on they were about fantastical things, but they were about like, well, what if real life people dealt with these things, right? And that was a shift. It wasn't like, well, let's not make Xena Warrior Princess like these fantastical characters, people you would never really meet in real life, right? Or like, the characters in like when I talked about Charm with the three witches, like those kinds of people, like characters, you don't really see those kinds of characters in real life. But to me, that was why it was cool, right? Because it was escape. You started seeing like these television shows that had these crazy, because Breaking Bad was about this guy that was like he was like dealing with like a cancer that was like very like close to being terminal, or it could be terminal, and so he was kind of like at wit's end, and so he started selling meth, right? Very fantastical story, but it was like, okay, let's see if let's put a real person in, like a person that anybody could relate to. And let's put them in this crazy situation, but let's spin it so like it's like a real person dealing with these. Like how would a real person react to these scenarios, right? That was a shift, right? And so you would see it wasn't that these situations in these TV shows were like super realistic situations. It's just the people, how they interacted with the situations was in a realistic way, and that was like really the focus. And even like they would stop like, okay, we're not even gonna shoot these TV shows like a television show anymore. We're gonna shoot them very realistically, like it's gonna be shot like a film, right? And we're gonna stop with this monster of the week stuff. We're not gonna end storylines in one episode. We're not even gonna end storylines in one season, right? We might have a whole entire show, and the conflict won't even be solved then, right? And the epitome of that is when you see shows like Lost. There was a show called Lost that came out that was very popular, and Lost was like this show again. There was like these realistic people, these people that you could see them like, oh yeah, I kind of know somebody like that in real life, but they were in this really crazy situation where they were in a plane, they crash landed in some deserted island, but that's like only the beginning. All types of crazy shit happened from there, but it's these realistic people. And the thing was, like, they had to deal with these scenarios, and they never really solved the problems. Just very similar to real life, right? In real life, you're confronted often with like conflicts and like difficult situations, and oftentimes you don't fully solve these situations, and you kind of just get, kind of cope with them, or kind of like manage them the best way you can, but you don't really completely solve these problems that we deal with. Like maybe it's debt, right? Real world problems, or like you're dealing with a relationship that, okay, maybe you broke up or whatever, but there's still all this stuff that's going on with maybe your friends are involved. In real life, problems don't get solved in this neat little way like they did like with the TV that I grew up with. And so these shows would like have these conflict resolutions that they didn't really solve the problems, and they have these crazy ass scenarios. But the scenarios would be treated as if real world people were like dealing with them. And this is supposed to be good, right? Because this is how the viewer relates to the TV. And it's like, well, if we make it relatable, then people will like it more, right? That's the idea. Yeah, I really like Breaking Bad too, the vibe. So people before 9/11 were extremely optimistic. I think a lot of optimism did die after 9/11. I would definitely say that was the case. I mean, you still had your emos and your goth people. You know, I mean, that's Generation X. It's like that. You know, I mean, you still had like, you know, there was the Cold War, and that was like this crazy situation where nuclear war was always on the horizon, and you know, people were upset. You know, but television was quite optimistic until when the 9/11 happened. That's when television kind of like you definitely started seeing a pivot in like, we gotta stop telling these like unbelievably optimistic stories and start like focusing on TV where it's about conflict, and it's not even about solving conflict, it's just about conflict. Right? And then Jeremy Borno says, I just despise how vulgar and crazy media has been. Obviously it can be subjective for me to say depending on past eras. Yeah, I mean, it depends. You know, I think a lot of eras do have vulgar because there was a lot of stuff in the 1980s that was really vulgar that came out. Or maybe you're even referring to that era. I mean, there's a lot of old school shit that's very crazy and vulgar. Not extremely remember Y2K2, but definitely more optimistic. Yeah, I remember Y2K. But Y2K wasn't really a thing. Did people really? I think it was. I don't even think people really took it seriously, right? Because you know, for those of you who wasn't there during the turn of the century, 1999 to 2000, there was this whole like paranoia where it's like, oh no, the computer's gonna crash because they don't know how to convert from the year 1990 to the year 2000, which is quite ridiculous type of. But there was this kind of pseudo paranoia. But I think ultimately most people were like not really tripping. Most people took that as like, oh, we're just gonna have one big party. Either I remember there was a lot of like fake end of the world parties because nobody took it seriously. They just used it as an excuse to party. Like, yeah, let's party, and then you know, 2000 hit and people were like, yeah, the world ended. Ha ha ha. You know, I remember a lot of that going on during that time. Right. And so then, like, and then we can continue with this, right? So you got, like, the Breaking Bad era, and then you know, the continuation of Breaking Bad, you see, like, shows like The Walking Dead, right? Where a show like that is really bleak, right? But again, it's, like, focusing on the, you know, even the creator of that show said, you know, the show, when I say The Walking Dead, I'm not referring to the zombies. I'm actually referring to the people. The people that are alive. They are The Walking Dead. You know, the argument was like, well, you know, if there was an actual zombie apocalypse, this is how people would actually act, which I'm not sure about that, right? You know, I think if you're a very nihilistic and negative person, you might think that, but I don't think everybody, because it's a very, not only is it dark in the sense like it's, you know, a zombie apocalypse, it's very like it doesn't have a lot of faith in humanity. Right? The show assumes like if humanity goes through such a situation, yeah, humanity's gonna go through the depths. Yeah, like not they're gonna like forego their morality completely, right? No faith in humanity with that shit. And then some people would argue like, yeah, that's how humans act. But I don't know if that's true. I mean, sure, like there's a lot of situations where human beings do forego their humanity, but there's many situations in histories where human beings do act moral. So I don't. But that's the notion, right? This idea of the realism is like nihilism. Like, you know, it's realistic to think like, oh, you know, actually there's no meaning in the world. Like, if you think there's meaning in the world, that's unrealistic. And see, like, to me, that's where the problem starts. And then you got Zoltor the Magnificent says, not extremely. Oh, okay, I already said that. Jeremy Borno said, one show I also remember watching a bit 13 Reasons Why. I think this show put mental health on the map. Oh, okay. I don't remember that show, but that might have been the time when I would just stop watching TV. So there's probably a lot of shows I didn't really watch. And so, like, you could even go forward in time with today, right? If we skip several years and we talk about, like, well, you're like, well, what about, like, superhero shows? Because that's, like, a huge thing now. Marvel superhero shows, DC shows, right? With Batman, Superman, Captain America, Iron Man. These are very unrealistic, fantastical. But again, like, it's imagining, like, what if real people were the superheroes? It's not like assuming, like, well, this is absurd from the get-go. So, for example, the 1960s Batman with Adam West, right? That was a very silly and goofy and, like, over-the-top comical Batman, right? It was not a realistic Batman. Like, somebody who was actually wearing a bat suit would not act like that, right? But it accepted the premise for what it is. Dude, it's like a guy dressed up as a bat, right? And he has a little boy living with him, and he calls him Robin. Like, it's absurd already. So you might as well just take the absurdity all the way, But current Batman is like, well, let's make it a realistic Batman where it's like a guy that's wrestling with his trauma, and let's really focus on the trauma that he dealt with. Even like in the 90s you had the Tim Burton Batman, which I also feel like is kind of like a nice even mix of the comical and the realistic. Not super realistic, but also not like super comical. But again, it's like it's kind of fun. Now you got this Batman, whichever one the Christopher Nolan version or the one with Ben Affleck played. He's like this super rough and dark and depressive Batman, and it's like the idea is like, well, this is the realistic Batman. And the same thing with Superman, right? Superman was, he's this like, the 1960s, 1970s. Superman is like, remember, kids, look both ways before crossing the street. He would like, he see a plane about to crash. Superman would fly up and save the airplane from crashing. Then he'd walk in the airplane. And remember, don't be discouraged by using an airplane. Air travel is actually still the safest form of flying. He'd be like a PSA man, basically. But it wasn't like, he didn't have to wrestle with like existential dread like nowadays with the modern Superman, where it's like, oh, I'm so powerful. I am cursed with this power. I don't know how to I love humanity, but I'm also, they don't love me back. What's wrong with me? This is a realistic kind of, and it's the same thing with the Marvel characters too. Right, where they're wrestling with like these real world problems. Is as if like, let's pretend they're real people. And so you're dealing with all this existentialism and this like nihilism, or this there's no room for just goofiness. There's no room for like optimism, right? But then we kind of frame this as, well, that's realistic, right? But is it though? Let's see. Jeremy, I want superhero movies to be mature as written in the comics. Well, I mean, what comics are we referring to, right? Because there are many comics, like the comics from the 1960s, that were not mature. They were for little kids, right? But then you have the 80s, right, with Tom McFarlane and Alan Moore, and they just take it to the super mature level. Comics weren't always, some comics were mature, some were not. I don't know. But then I guess my issue is, why is this framed as realistic as opposed to like more optimistic, or even like goofier comics? They're like, oh, that's not realistic, so we, that's not, we don't give critical acclaim to that. And then Zoltar the Magnificent. Nowadays, doom and gloom. Exactly. Off topic, did you read Blood Meridian yet? Nope. Sorry, I didn't. It's right here, though. Now you got glare. Because, finally I'm using a... It's not like a... It's just a regular light. It's just sitting right... I have so many other books I'm reading. I'm probably not going to read this in a while. But it's here. I'm sure that book is very dark. So I would just like to pose the question. Do you think that realism equals doom and gloom? Like, do you think optimism is unrealistic? Like, or when you see stories that have conflict in it and they have like moments, where it's primarily like silly and like over the top and like maybe a little bit absurdist, do you feel like, well, I don't like that because that's just not realistic? Do you prefer when you see like superhero movies and they're more broody and like depressive and nihilistic and like why am I doing this? And they're wrestling with like trauma. Do you find that more appealing? And is the reason why you find that appealing due to the fact that do you think that's more realistic? Like, well, yeah, I find it more appealing because that's really how the world is. Because I would push back and say like, nah, I don't know about that. I think that's an idea that we push, but it's not always the case. The vibe, is it realistic because the characters have been made to become an individual, but this trait are not fully the entire picture of the world, as people then trend to have issue with it, like a false narrative of the real world? I don't even know what you're saying here. Let me see. They tend to have narrow ideas. Because the characters have been made to become an individual. I don't know. I don't think so. I prefer superheroes, the goofy superheroes. So I want to, let's use another example. I'm trying to think of, I'm not going to use Superman. I'm not going to use Batman. Iron Man, no. I feel like, well, I was gonna say, I guess we could use Spider-Man as an example. But I think Spider-Man's good. Because Spider-Man, his whole concept is he's like a sarcastic guy that pops jokes all the time. But, he also deals with a lot of turmoil as well in his life. But I always liked Spider-Man because he was kind of this like goofy. He always like said jokes while fighting. Sometimes he would even self-deprecate himself with his jokes. He was kind of silly. I always liked that aspect of Spider-Man. I didn't like when they started making Spider-Man into like this. Again, with the whole existentialism and the whole like, why am I here? What does it mean? And now that's when was that? In the comics, that happened when the symbiote came out with the stuff that makes Venom. That merges with Eddie Brock to make Venom. Spider-Man started becoming more broody. I don't know. In the comics, now in the TV shows or the movies. Oh yeah, I guess the movies did. That was when they did that. Because the third Spider-Man movie when the Venom came out, he was a bit more. But he was mean. He was like broody, but it was kind of comical, was it? So that was fine. Although a lot of people didn't like that. But the Spider-Man's that tend for him to, when he's more like a depressing teenager, when he's kind of like more emo-ish. I'm not into emo Spider-Man. I guess that's what I'm saying. But is emo Spider-Man the more realistic Spider-Man, or is sarcastic Spider-Man unrealistic? You can definitely be emo and sarcastic, but maybe if you're emo and sarcastic, maybe that's what gothic is. Maybe that's what gothic. I don't know. What was there? Some people are saying stuff. Beast Boy is goofy. Teen Titans are both goofy and badass. I don't like the. I think it's called Teen Titans Go. I know that's a divisive show. Where Teen Titans Go, I think it's geared toward kids. They had the Teen Titans that was a bit more kind of serious, but it still had its moments of goofiness. But then they went all full goofiness with the Teen Titans Go. I think that was, why did I not? Because I think it's because they didn't. The conflict just is not there. I mean, it's cool to have some conflict, right? That's fine. When you like don't have any conflict and it's just like a sitcom, I don't know about that. And a sitcom like, Seinfeld style, where it's like, what is this even about? It's about nothing. That's the whole point. I think that new Teen Titans, Teen Titans Go is very old now. But the one that came after that cartoon, the original cartoon from Cartoon Network, I remember that. Gothic stories deal with fear and trauma. And then that's what Jeremy Borno says. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and then you could definitely, and then you could have stories that have fear and trauma in it. But it's the shows that kind of obsess in the trauma, when the trauma becomes like the only thing the show is about. That's what I'm like. Well, I mean, life is more than just trauma, right? I don't know. I like optimism that recognizes the negatives in life but believes progress and good are the ultimate goal. Plus Ultra. Let's take a show, for example. Let's take the show The Walking Dead, for instance. I'm not a fan of The Walking Dead. I know that show is like highly critically acclaimed. I know, like it's like the dead horse that just won't. It's like the beating of the dead horse now. It's a show that just kind of goes on forever. So like I know most people don't watch that show anymore, but at the time when it was very popular, like everybody was giving that show rave reviews. But I never liked The Walking Dead. I just thought it was just too. Well, I mean, there was many reasons. I first of all, I thought the storylines were kind of like predictable. Number one, but aside, the more reason is I just didn't vibe with the negative outlook of like the story, because the whole premise is like, the whole idea is, if a zombie apocalypse were to happen, this is actually how human beings would act. And I was like, well, no, like because in the show, like the human beings are constantly like cutting each other's throats, and they're like, turning on each other, and they're just, and there's some characters that have just abandoned all morals absolutely completely, and they're like, I just do whatever the fuck I want type of idea. And so what happens is the humans are become more of antagonistic than the actual zombies, right? And I'm like, nah, I don't think that's how it's gonna go down, man. I'm sure like there are gonna be plenty of those that are gonna do that, but there's not all the humans are gonna do that. Some human beings are gonna be like, you know what? I'm not gonna go down this road. Like I'm gonna like. And it's not going to be just a few. It's going to be several of them that are going to band together and be like, let's try and like figure this shit out, right? I thought it was a kind of a bad take, but not just bad in the sense that I didn't like it. It's bad because I just thought the writing, it was unbelievable the way they told the story. I was like, human beings wouldn't act like this. It's just not believable. And to the point where it's like, this is kind of bad writing, right? Because would human beings actually act like that? Some would, but not all would, right? I like zombie apocalypses, or like apocalyptic or dystopian shows where like there's a group of people that are like, okay, let's try and solve this problem, right? You know, another like kind of zombie apocalypse storyline that's not a movie, I think, is Fallout. There's a video game franchise, right? Fallout is like, you know, the Cold War, you know, results in a nuclear war, right? I mean, that's the premise of Fallout. Like, oh well, what if in the 1950s a nuclear war did happen, and so now you have the whole world is like destroyed and it's all this nuclear fallout everywhere, right? But you know, even in that storyline, there are groups of people that band together and like, okay, let's figure let's figure out a way to treat the water and make it drinkable again and stuff like that. You know, there's this group called the Brotherhood, or they're not like perfect, but they are like trying to like make the world a better place, as opposed to like, and I think that's realistic. Now you also have the other groups that don't give a damn and they're like running amok and they're basically bandits and all like that. Okay, I can see that. But you know, it's an even mix. It's not like in The Walking Dead where it's like, well, there's nobody. Like everybody's just cutting everybody's throats. Nobody gives a damn about anybody. Like, and it's just this constant repeat. Like that to me, that's just bad writing. I don't know. And so I think like that is the idea of what's realistic today. Right? Why are we like? Do people just not care about people anymore? Like, you know, like, or like, you know, is it the case that we always let our nihilistic tendencies take over? Right? Do we always let trauma like defeat us? Like is that how we think we are as people nowadays? Like there's no, you know, people go through traumatic experiences. Some people are able to deal with those traumatic experiences. You know, of course, they're always still going to be there, you know, affecting us, but they can still live successful lives and they can still live happy lives, right? But I guess I see the stories today where like the message is, no, you experience intense trauma, you will never be happy. Like that's just not a thing and if you think that's a thing, then you're living in a fantasy. Like that's not believable. And stories like that are bad. Like that's how I see media is interpreting the world nowadays. You know, I think that's just I don't like it. Let's see, is there anybody? Let's see what people are saying. Let's see. Life of progress. And then Zoltar the Magnificent says, and mature tales that respect the shadow but realize good is still sought after and important. I just like stories that have a diverse array of intentions, because there are some people who are like, yeah, fuck the good. I'm just gonna do bad shit. Right? I'm just gonna fuck shit up. Like I know people like that in the real world, but not everybody's like that. So I like to see a diverse array of characters where some people are like that and some people aren't. And also, because some of these minor shows, they will have those characters but then they'll make the people who don't give a shit, they're the ones that are the heroes or the winners, or they're the ones that are like focused, and they might kill off those optimistic characters. And it's like, that's real life isn't like that, right? Like that's not realistic, it's constantly but then they present it as like, well, that's just how the world really is. Like no it's not. And then they further say like, it's unrealistic to think that there can be characters that actually want to make the world better, even though they've experienced bad stuff. Those characters usually die off or they suffer to the point where you don't see them anymore, or nice guys always finish last is like the main point of the story. And I'm like, I don't know, I just see like minor stories like that's how it is now. And then you're saying Jeremy Borno says traumatic stories are relatable in my opinion, but because they make people feel sad for characters, and so many people experience trauma. Traumatic stories. Yeah. Like a tragedy. Tragedies are stories that have always been popular, like Romeo and Juliet. That's a tragedy. But I guess that's different from traumatic. Where I just don't like, I'm not a fan of, and I don't even think it's realistic, right? That just focus so much on the trauma and like that's all there is. And there's like nothing else other than trauma. Because, that's how I see. That's why I remember in a past stream, people were bringing up like, do you like this manga called Berserk? I think it's also an anime. Berserk, very extremely popular manga. I think the creator of the manga died, a year or two ago. Very popular manga, Berserk. I couldn't get down with it. I'm not saying it's a poor manga. Like, I'm sure the art is great. Story, it was well written and everything, but I didn't like it because it was just all it was trauma. Just trauma. Like, could we like have anything other than trauma? And I feel like that's all stories today. Right? It's just like, damn, could I like have something else other than like, pain and suffering? Emotional pain, spiritual pain, physical pain, right? Psychological pain. And I mean, that's all what Berserk. I mean, when I read Berserk, I'm like, okay, can I get a break? Like, can we get some comic relief or some shit? But no, it's like, it's always to the point where it's like, y'all just trying to like show this trauma. Like, you're making it like, oh, this character is so cool because this character can take all the pain. Like, it's like a character isn't cool just because they can take extreme amounts of pain. I don't know. That's just what I think. Okay, then you say, Beast Boy is my dog, my green dog. It doesn't. People cannot overcome trauma. Traumatic characters have to develop their moral compass to evolve. But isn't that overcoming trauma? Developing their moral compass to evolve, right? That's part of overcoming trauma. Oh, trauma can be overcome. That's not to say like you can like completely eradicate trauma, or like, you can like make trauma just go away like magically. Like, no, I mean, yeah, trauma doesn't work like that. You're always gonna live with the trauma that you deal with, and the more extreme, the more you're always gonna deal with it. But you can overcome it, meaning you don't have to let the trauma rule your life, is what I'm saying. Like, there are things that you can do to not allow the trauma to control your life absolutely, right? And to me, that's what it means to overcome, which is not to say like you're not going to erase it, right? And to me, like, that's a good story. Right, a good story is like, okay, how does this? Because people do that all the time, and I don't think we give humanity enough credit. When we see people like, wow, you went through this really fucked up situation, but now you're in a better place and you're like helping other people out. To me, that's like you overcame your trauma. Not to like say that you erased it, but you overcame it. Right? That's a good story. But now, like, you don't see stories like that. It's like the trauma is always defeating the person, or the person is always controlled by the trauma that they dealt with. And like we say like, yeah, that's life. Like, people get hurt and they experience like horrific events, and those events will dominate them for the rest of their life. Like, damn, that's a fucked up that's a pretty shitty outlook of the human experience, right? I don't know, ultimately I think that's lazy writing, right? Because it kind of, you're not like incorporating all the ways human beings actually deal with trauma in ways that are constructive, progressive. You're not even like factoring that in. So like you as a writer, like your capacity for ideas is very limited. Okay, let me see. I agree. Trauma is relatable. So many of us are hurt and traumatized. We need to process this and regain equilibrium. Yeah, exactly. Process it and regain equilibrium, or like some sense of self, right? You are not your trauma. Like, sure, your trauma is a part of you. I'm not saying, like, I'm not trying to diminish your experiences, right? Though they're part of you, but they are not you completely. But the problem is, stories today, I would argue, like, they make trauma, like, the trauma is the character itself, right? And I think, human beings are amazing because that doesn't happen with us. Like, we deal with these horrible situations, but the trauma does not completely define us. So, like, we develop all the aspects of ourselves, and we're still able to create positive things from it, right? With a few ready resources, right. Do you see silly characters as deep? To most people, they don't represent the complete complexity of humanity. Why does a character have to represent the complexity of humanity? Right? Like, is that something that is like? I'm trying to think. Are good characters that represent the complexity of humanity? No. Because that's a lot to ask for. I mean, I do like good character growth and character development, and it is important for characters, deep characters with multiple dimensions. That's good, but they don't have to be like ultra super incredibly deep for them to be good, right? Hence, like a lot of 1990s television shows. I would argue tragedy can be cathartic, sure, but self-replicating without full perspective. Humor and optimism can work like magic or secret codes. Ooh. Reshape reality with alchemy. Okay. You haven't read Berserk enough. There were so many moments where Guts redeemed himself and loved his family. That's cool. Yeah, that's his quote unquote family, because chosen family and all that. That's cool, but when people say when people recommend me Berserk and I say why, because of all the violence and the gore, like that's what they they don't highlight those parts when they it would be nice if they did tell me, like, why should I read Berserk? Well, you should read Berserk because it's fucking like amazing with its action sequences and like its goriness and its mature themes and it's violent, ultra violence. When people sell me Berserk, they're not selling me like what you just put. They're telling me like, so I'm like, why would I want to read that? I mean, I like, I'm not like a prude. Like, violence is cool, but if it has that kind of stuff, that's cool. I'm sure it does have that, but I don't think, from what people tell me, and you'd be the first one to tell me, like, that's not why people recommend, why people are like, that's not where the praise of Berserk comes from. praise of Berserk is coming from how it depicts violence, right? I don't, but maybe so. The Berserk is the reason why Berserk is such a masterpiece is because it depicts the redemption of Guts and how he loved his family. I mean, I can read. I don't want to like, um, you know, use Berserk as a punching bag, but at the same time, I can read a lot of stories where I could get that without the hyper violence, which is like, but I know some people are really into hyper violence, and that's fine too. So, and again, like, I guess when I was a lot younger, I used to be really into hyper, but then I started like, I started being like, is this really necessary? As I get older, I find like that's not a thing I care about as much as I used to. But some people really like violence, and that's in a story, fictional story, and that I'm not knocking that. I'm not like a prude when it comes to like hyper violence, horror. I have a lot of friends who are into horror, and like, what's the one? Extreme horror. I'm not really into that, but I'm not. They're into that. That's cool. I skipped around here. Zoro Magnet, right? It panders to our pain, but neglects to really help. But could hold us down. The art in Berserk looks amazing. Yeah. It's drawn very well. Sandman was a good example as dark but rich and powerful writing. Yeah, I tried getting into Sandman. I really did. I started reading Sandman. The problem I had with Sandman is it references too much like literature that I haven't read. Neil Gaiman, he's like extremely well read, so he'll just like throw in all these references of just things I just don't know. And it's funny I say that because I read a lot of obscure philosophy and stuff like that. So even for me, which is not to say like, well, if I can't do it, no, I'm not saying that. Just to say, like, I'm sure that the story is Sandman is very good. I can't handle all the references and like all the callbacks to all this literature. Like, I'm not making these connections, man. It's a little too highbrow for me, which I like my highbrow. I'm not saying I don't like highbrow, but Sandman is very highbrow. I'm surprised so many people like it because it's so literary, right? Which is, man, that's great. It's good for people to get it. But it was a bit too literary for me, even though I do read a lot. Yeah, it's tough for me to get into those kinds of comics. Sandman. Another one was Watchmen. I could not, for the life of me. I was like trying. I'm like, I'm just not getting into this, which is kind of funny. I thought it was like Watchmen, the comic book. It felt to me like Alan Moore, I think is the writer. It was like he wrote a comic book to be taught in like a graduate school college or something. Like, is this like supposed to be a comic textbook or something? Like, I'm sure like, you probably study this book in graduate, like they probably like this is assigned reading, like illustration, like comic storytelling or something. The way it seemed to be a bit too what's the word? It seemed like educational material. I like a lot of nonfiction, but And that's how Sandman is to me. So I mean, the art is beautiful, but sometimes I read it and I'm like, am I gonna get like? Is there gonna be a test after this? Like, am I gonna have to write an essay after I read this? Like, with a thesis, and does it have to be double spaced? Right? Do I have to cite my sources? How many sources do I have to cite after I finish reading this? That's how I felt. But Sandman is very critically acclaimed, so that's cool. It was also liberating and helpful for many. If we want excellent stories from shows and movies, there has to be some depth and complexity. Yeah, that's true. That's true. I'm trying to think, like, does it have to be depth and complexity? I'm trying to think, like, I'm rewatching a lot of movies that I like as a kid. I often like half watched movies. Like, as a kid, I actually watched a lot of TV, and we had cable, and with cable TV, like they reshow like all types of shit, and they put like commercial breaks in it that are like super long. So a lot of times you'll just watch stuff that kind of half watch it because it'd be interrupted by commercials and stuff. And so I half watched a lot of good movies. I just recently rewatched The Sandlot. I've seen that movie many times, but I've never like watched it from beginning to end with my full attention, with no commercial breaks, because I would always see it on TV as a little kid. And that movie was awesome. That was a great film. Was it like super complex and did it have a lot of depth? Not really, but it was like a really good movie. It was a little complex, but it wasn't like super complex. And, it had a little depth, but it wasn't like super deep. But it was like a nice comedy adventure. The Sandlot. It's quite a popular movie. Kids playing baseball and just kind of like coming of age. Great movie, but I mean, what else did I just watch? What was it called? Stand By Me. That's not a comedy, but and it was like a little. It's Stand By Me is this another popular movie. I think it came out like late 80s. I don't remember. Might have been an 80s movie. But it had the young Will Wheaton is in it. That guy, the boy from Star Trek Next Generation. Keith Sutherland's in it, I think. River Phoenix, the brother of Joaquin Phoenix, who passed away. He's in it. It's a great movie. It's a movie about kids. They just go on this journey to basically this kind of like coming of age type of thing, and they deal with a lot of conflict. It's not like the most complex story in the world, and it's also not the most deep story in the world, but it's a really good story movie. I thought, like, man, this is a really good movie. I've seen it before, but I never like sat down and just watched it from beginning to end like that. There's like this movie rental store like a few blocks away from where I live. So I go and rent movies. I rent a lot of old movies that I was like, I remember that movie, but I actually never sat down and watched it like with my full attention. I just read it like do that. There's a lot of movies like that, where it's like it's not like super complex and it's not super deep, but it's cool. It's a really good film. Jeremy Bono. Here's an instance. What do you think about Mammy in Gone with the Wind? Do you find her to be a good character with romance of the movie? Man, I be honest with you, I've never. That's one of those movies where I never watched the whole movie from beginning to end. I remember sometimes, it would be on TV. Isn't it like a long ass movie too? I don't. It might not be. But my mama would be watching it. And I would kind of like watch like 10 minutes of it, leave, and then come back like 5 minutes later, watch it. Like it'd have commercial breaks. So I remember Mammy, but I can't like judge it because I haven't seen the whole film, and I kind of don't want to see it because it seems kind of boring. But I don't know. Yeah, I don't know. I know that was the nurse or the caretaker in the family. I know there was like she won an Academy Award. The actor that played her, I think it's like the first black woman actor to win an Academy Award, or maybe it's the first black actor to win an Academy Award. So apparently, like it was a good role that she had good quality acting. Do you find her to be a good character? I don't know. I can't even answer because I haven't seen it really. Old Hollywood would be considered overly sentimental and romantic. It was a prison to creativity. Well, some of those old movies are really good. I don't know how old you're talking. Like a lot of those Alfred Hitchcock movies, they're like masterpieces. I love those are movies I remember. My mama used to watch a lot of black and white films. Wasn't it A&E? Yeah, the channel A&E. Before they started showing Breaking Bad, they would show like black and white movies or old Hollywood films, and I think they might not show that. I think now it's like TMC, Turner Classic Movies, TCM, because she still watches. I recently visited her. I went and visited my family. Baba was there, and she still watches old movies. We watched, I think it's called The Big Country or Old Country. Let me see if I could just Google it right quick. The Big Country. Yeah, that's it. Yeah. The Big Country, 1958. And granted, like my mom's not old. Like she was like not even born. 1958, she was like a toddler when that movie came out. So she didn't watch that movie when it was in theaters. Let me see. But a lot of those old Hollywood movies are great. So The Big Country is what is it about? It's a very famous classic movie. It's got a lot of famous lines like in it, like that one famous line where the guy says, "I'll teach your grandmother to suck eggs." Is that movie? I don't know if you've heard that line. That's like a famous line in like movie history. It's just about it's this starring Gregory Peck, this old school actor, and he's like he's a sailor, but now he's trying to transition into like living in the big country, like the prairies and shit. And so he's like trying to navigate. I think he has an inheritance or he has land that he's trying to sell. And a lot of these old movies, they have these really like convoluted premises that the movie isn't really about what the beginning of the story is. It's just him trying to like deal with the complexities of like the land that he's trying to buy and like his land he's inherited or something. And it really is these two families or these two organizations or these two groups are like fighting for this land, and it's about this drama of these two competing groups, and he's like in the middle of that. And it's just this interesting like series of events that happen, really. I mean, there's kind of this overarch, but really it's just very interesting. A lot of these old movies, they're just very interesting series of events. Of course they have these like, they begin with these scenarios, but then you find out the movie's not about like what the story originally starts out as. A lot of these old movies are like that. And really, yeah, a lot of these old movies you can kind of like take scenes out of the movie, like vignettes, and like they stand alone in isolation. And it was a great movie. A lot of those old movies are really good. I think realism in the mainstream right now allows actors and actresses to be uncensored, and I respect it to the heavens. Okay. A lot of actors be uncensored. Yeah, because a lot of those, like the shows I first talked about, like Xena Warrior Princess, there's only so much range you could express as an actor in a character like Xena Warrior Princess, right? Like you can't get too dramatic because it's like, whoa, what do you think this is? Right? So I get what you're saying there. But I think again, like a lot of that old Hollywood, they were able to kind of like go the full range as well. But I guess it's kind of a difference because one may argue like, well, you know, they can't really do certain things because of like the censorship and all that. But I don't know. Sometimes it's like, you know, you'll have like scenes of like extreme nudity, or like they'll have these full blown like sex scenes, like it's pornography. And you know, and then people are like, "Yeah, that's good acting." It's like, just because it goes to the extreme doesn't mean it's good acting. You know? But sometimes it is good acting. I don't know. But you know, just because it's like super explicit doesn't necessarily mean it's like quality acting. And then you say the more uncensored a movie or show is, the more emotional expression there is. I don't know about that. I mean, you know, then what about the movie Jackass? Right? That's a very uncensored movie where they're like, you know, people getting kicked in the balls. You might even see a guy's penis, right? Is there a lot of emotion? Well, there is a lot of emotional expression. Now that's true. A lot of like expressions of comedy and you know, people laughing at each other, just getting kicked in the groin and shit. So okay, sure. I watched the Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf. That movie was with the beautiful Elizabeth Taylor, helped break the Hays Cod and put an end to glamour of Hollywood. Yeah, that's another. I remember that movie. Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf? That's a great film. Yeah, that's a great film. So you know, a lot of that old Hollywood stuff is pretty good. Mm-hmm. And sometimes it's like, because a lot of those old movies have been they're limited in what they can do. Like a lot of it is just dialogue, right? And, you know, it's amazing how much you can express through dialogue. But you know, we all know that because a lot of the old theater, you know, even the Greek plays, it was primarily dialogue. A lot of like Shakespearean stuff was primarily dialogue, and you could express a lot out of it from that. So yeah. That's all? We've reached the end of the commentary. Cool. So yeah, I just wanted to hop on here and talk about, you know, that it's true. Like it is grievances. You know, I don't like doing. Well, you know, rants they have their place too. But I'm not really a rant type of guy. But you know, I do express my grievances sometimes. I don't like how, and like a lot of people was saying, they just don't watch TV. I'm one of those where it's like, you know, I don't like TV how it is today, or like even a lot of movies today are not the best. But maybe that's just me being an old fogey, you know. Okay, boomer. And I totally accept that. Like, yeah, he's just not with these current times. I just feel like realism is prioritized, and you don't have to be super realistic to make a great story. Sometimes you can be fantastical, and it can still be an amazing story. You don't have to center your stories on trauma, right? Because most stories today, the center of the story is trauma, right? Even comedies, right? Which is kind of I don't know what it is today. You know, I guess it's kind of a backlash because a lot of people, you know, there was a time when people just didn't talk. You're not encouraged to talk about your trauma, and that's bad. You should be able to go into a safe space with people you love and talk about your pain and get some support for that. But I find like, a lot of old school movies, like what I talked about with Stand By Me was a great movie where, people were out and open about like their hurt, but they didn't, like, that wasn't the primary focus of the movie, and they were able to like kind of overcome their emotional turmoil through the power of the relationships what they had with each other. I like those kinds of stories better than like, woe is me, like I've dealt with so much pain in my life and now I'm fucked and the world is fucked. Oh well. That's like the how it is today. But maybe you disagree. I don't know. To conclude, do you think it's best that shows and movies express moral themes? No. Some can, you don't have to have a moral theme. You could just have a show or a movie about just having a good time. Just having fun. Like a movie, I don't know why it just came to me, like Animal House, which is like, a movie about a frat house, a fraternity, which is a great movie. Does that have a moral theme? No, but it's still a great film. So you don't have to be moral, like, because I know a lot of, I was saying like everybody's abandoning the morals. I'm just saying, like, I feel like the modern stories today make it seem, they're trying to, the message is human beings abandon their morals. Like, that's what human beings do, right? And if you don't think that, then that's unrealistic, right? You're living in a dream world. And also, like, to the point where it's like, if you put characters in your story that don't abandon their morals, that's bad storytelling. Right? We don't like that. Those type of movies get bad scores. Right? They don't get highly rated rates. The movies that get the highest ratings are the ones that abandon their morals. It's like, well, that's not. Why are we presenting this as this realistic thing that's cool? That's me. But that's just my point of view. Well, yeah, I'd just like to thank, y'all who tuned in and watched. Had a good discussion here. Probably will come to, have another discussion next week about some other topic. And if you guys want to recommend anything from me, feel free to do so in the comment section below or the chat. Oh, sorry. It's just 8:30 here where I'm at, 8:20. So it's not that late. I guess I did have a busy, I did do a lot of stuff today. But thanks. I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.